Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome back to my channel, and if this is your first time here, welcome to my channel. So today we are going to be solving the function cosine x multiplied by cosecant x, and this is the 9th question we're going to be doing in this series. And as you can see from the thumbnail, the title, as well as the first part of the information, you can see that we're going to be applying the product rule. The goal here is to differentiate the function cosine x multiplied by cosecant x, and since we have two sub-functions, cosine x and cosecant x multiplied by each other, we have to apply the product rule in order for us to differentiate it. So as we can see, we have the product rule general formula here, which is the derivative of the first sub-function multiplied by the second sub-function plus the derivative of the second sub-function multiplied by the first sub-function. And since this is the information we have here, we are good to go. So the first thing we have to do is to identify what is f of x and what is g of x. Following the general formula f of x multiplied by g of x, we can say f of x in this question is cosine x, okay? And then g of x in this question is cosecant x, right? So now that we know that when I apply the product rule, we can start solving the question. So the derivative of cosine x multiplied by cosecant x equals the derivative of cosine x, okay, multiplied by cosecant x plus the derivative of cosecant x multiplied by f of x. Here is cosine of x. So basically this is what it is, and the next thing you know, or the next thing you have to do is let's start solving, right? Let us start solving. Now you have what is the derivative of cosine x. If you've been watching the series for a while, then you know that I always have a page dedicated to trig notes, and in this case of this all the videos on this series are gonna have this page, or the ones that are previously already had this page. But one thing you should know is I have trigonometric videos or solving trigonometric functions using chain rule and quotient rule, and this page of info or trig notes info is always there. I will advise you that if this is the first time watching my YouTube video, you should please pause it right now and should copy all of this information down. It's very, very important. Now, also know that since this is the trig notes page, each one of these trig info is a collective group of things. So this left part of the screen, where you have sine x equals to 1 over cosecant x, cosecant x equals to 1 over sine x, cosine x equals to 1 over secant x is the same thing as 1 over cosine x. All of this info is what you would call a trig expression, okay? A trig expression. Now, the info on the top right corner of this page is what you would call a trig identity. Basically, the sine squared, cosine squared, all of this something like trig squared, like in this case cotangent squared plus 1 equals cosecant squared. So these are called trig identities. Now, the information that is in red, written in red, like derivative of sine x equals cosine x, derivative of cosine x equals sine x, all of that information, they are called trig derivatives, okay? Everything written in red, trig, is called a trig derivative. So that's it. That's basically what we have here. So now we have the derivative of cosine x. We're asked to find what that is. Well, guess what that is? Negative sine x, right? So you have negative sine x multiplied by cosecant x plus, what is the derivative of cosecant x? Can go back to the information. Oh yeah, all the trig derivative are written in red, right? So it's not difficult to find that out. We have trig derivative of the trig function cosecant x is the same thing as negative cosecant x multiplied by cotangent x. So you have negative cosecant x multiplied by cotangent x. And then we have this cosine x right here. We're just going to drop it down and say multiplied by cosine x. So let's do so basically the derivative of cosine x multiplied by cosecant x is the same thing as negative sine x cosecant x, right, minus cosecant x cotangent x cosine of x. That is it, right? So now this is our answer. We've already applied the product rule. This is what we actually get to be the answer. But one thing you need to know is, since we're dealing with trig, and I'm sure this is not the first time that you're hearing me say this, if you're consistently watching the series, like if you watch the first 8 videos, so you already kind of understand the whole picture of this. So now we can't just put the answer like this. I mean, we can. This is the answer. Whenever you're dealing with trig, because of there's so much info on trig expression, trig identity, trig derivative, you need to be very smart and you need to find a way in mathematics to clean up your work. Just like if you have 2x, right, e to the x plus 2x e to the 2x, you can bring out 2x here and just say e to the x plus e to the 2x. You know how you can do that in math, where you have to factorize and you basically make your work neater? That's what we're going to do with the trig function. We're going to clean it up. We're going to make the answer more compact, more direct, and less complicated, because what we have here is complicated. Negative sine x cosecant x minus cosecant x cotangent x cosine. That's a lot. That's a mouthful. So what you need to do is write this down. I'm going to rewrite this down. Okay. And we have negative sine x cosecant x plus negative cosecant x cotangent x cosine of x, right? So one thing you need to know is, when we're trying to make our work neater in trig, we have to try to put our work in such a way that we can easily basically simplify it, right? And in order for us to simplify it, or the best way to simplify trigonometric functions that I've come to know, is turning everything into sine and cosine. So we're going to rewrite this here. Negative sine x, right? What is cosecant x? What does that represent? Okay, let's go back to our trig expression. Cosecant x represents 1 over sine x. Okay, so we can now import that value here. So this will be multiplied by 1 over sine x, right? Now minus, because plus and minus basically minus, cosecant x. What is cosecant x in terms of sine and or cosine? Is the same thing as 1 over sine x. Now we have multiplied by cotangent x. What is cotangent x? What does it represent in terms of sine and cosine, to make our work easier? Well, cotangent x is the same thing as 1 over tan x. It's also the same thing as cosine x over sine x. Okay. Therefore, instead of doing 1 over tan x, let's pick the cosine x over sine x. So multiplied by cosine x over sine x, right? And then we have cosine x here, which we can just simply drop down here. So of course, we're going to start to simplify. Well, we already started simplifying. We're going to continue simplifying. Negative sine x divided by negative sine x on the numerator, and then the denominator, they cancel each other out. So we end up with, let me continue, red, negative 1 minus. Now you have cosine x in the numerator, and sine x, and then sine x again in the denominator. So we can just multiply. Cosine x multiplied by cosine x is the same thing as cosine squared of x. Okay, and then sine x multiplied by sine x in the denominator is sine squared of x, right? So when we go back to this, what is it whenever we have cosine x over sine x? If we look at this portion, we can see cosine x over sine x is the same thing as cotangent x. But guess what? We have cosine square x and sine square x. We can basically instead say -1 minus, since cosine x over sine x is the same thing as cotangent x, that means cosine square x over sine square x is the same thing as cotangent square x. And this is our answer. So if we rewrite it, we can rewrite it as such. Negative, we're on the negative, and we have 1 plus cotangent square x. Now, I'm sure you're like, damn, we've done a lot of stuff, but at least we have the trig notes paper to help us that you guys have written down. Now your work isn't actually done, because we can now go back and compare 1 plus cotangent square x. Guess what? One thing I've not mentioned is this is good. This answer is good and correct. If you have some professors that are not too fussy, he can give you a full point on this. This is also, this answer here is also absolutely correct, right? This is correct. This one here is also correct. We just want our work neater. Since we're dealing with trig, we want to simplify. So 1 plus cotangent square x. This looks familiar. If you've written down this and you've been playing with trig for a while, then you're going to know 1 plus cotangent square x is the same thing as cotangent square x plus 1, which is what we have here in the yellow thing on the round, which under trig identities, that's the same thing as cosecant square x. So therefore here we can have our answer to be negative cosecant squared of x. This is our answer. This is literally our answer. Our answer is this. So yeah, this is basically the answer. You can see how better negative cosecant square x is in comparison to negative sine x, cosecant x, minus cosecant x, cotangent x, cosine x. You can see how much better it is. Now I also want to teach you a shortcut method. This shortcut method is supposed to help you. It's supposed to help you so you don't always have to go through the whole process. So you have the derivative of cosine x, right? Cosecant x, and you're asked to find it. So it's question mark. One thing you can do is for you to break down the trig function before you even differentiate. This is a shortcut method. Of course, you have to do the long cut method to teach yourself, right? To teach yourself the various rules. Maybe you're doing quotient rule, chain rule, product rule. That's why we have to go through the whole process of proving it. So cosine x multiplied by cosecant x. If you remember what cosecant x was, what did we say what cosecant x was? Cosecant x is basically 1 over sine x, right? So we can say cosine x multiplied by 1 over sine x. And what did we say cosine x over sine x was? We said that was cotangent x, if you guys remember. We did a couple of it here. So see it here. So yeah, you see 1 over sine x, we did it here, we did it here. So 1 over sine x, that's cotangent x. Now if we want to be sure, we can now do the derivative of cotangent x, right, with respect to we can now say the derivative of cosine x multiplied by cosecant x, the same thing as the derivative of cotangent x. And we know that when we look at the trig identity the trig derivative information, what's the derivative of cotangent x? Oh my gosh, we can look at it at the bottom here in green, and that is basically negative cosecant squared of x. If you look at it at the bottom of the page, so our answer here is negative cosecant squared x. You can see how the shortcut method works. Rather than doing this entire page, this page here of work, right? We could have just gotten the answer to do this. So this is a detailed explanation of this. I hope you guys like this video. If you like this video, keep watching this series. I have another series like this where I play a lot with all of the trig expressions in terms of solving them by quotient rule, chain rule, all sorts of rule, and I apply even the power rule whenever I'm working on the chain rule with them. So you guys should please like this video, you guys should subscribe, you guys should tell me what you want to see and what you would like to be worked on more. So yeah, and please, if you have any questions, go into the description box, because many times I already have answered the question that you're thinking, and if your answer is not answered in the description box, please leave a comment, and have a good rest of your day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.